Welcome back, everybody. This is an excerpt from the Danny Jon4es Podcast that I watched earlier. Two ex-CIA agents are discussing the ideology of America versus other countries and why sometimes what we try to do to offer aid and help to other folks isn't as accepted as it is from other countries. Let's check out the video.
That on a trip to Africa one time, I was kind of joking with a Congolese foreign ministry official about...
You can't joke with a Congolese foreign ministry official.
No, they have no senses of humor. They have no senses of humor at all.
It's because their fucking life is hard.
And they also have their hands out like this all the time.
Yeah.
But anyway, I said, what's with you and the Russians? You guys are always so chummy, close to the Russians. And very seriously, he said to me, because you promise us democracy and the Russians promise us food.
Bingo.
Wow.
That's how the whole world works.
Mm-hmm.
The whole world is practical. We are ideological, which we only get that luxury because we are the superpower of the world.
I understand where he's coming from. My initial reaction would be, we probably think, and when I say we, it's going to be the United States ideology of trying to spread our way of thinking, democracy, spend time and work your way up country, instead of, hey country, you're starving, your people are starving, we're not trying to sell you something, let's just, here's this for this, not here's this for you change your ideology. That's what I get from that.
As soon as we are no longer...
meaning the citizens are ideological, not necessarily the people running the country.
No, the United States.
The whole country.
The whole country.
Yeah.
Yeah, ideology goes all the way up. Everybody's trying to push their ideology. The polarization that we're seeing politically right now is really a polarization of ideology.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
Right.
That's what, and it's unfortunate because we have become so spoiled by what we have that we are now seeing the second and third generation of people who have never actually suffered, people who have never actually wondered where the next meal is going to come from. And those people have gone all the way up to the senior ranks of government and business and politics and everything else. Like, you can still find people who literally live foot to mouth in the United States. There are people below the poverty line.
There absolutely is. But I understand what he's saying, that we have these multi-generational folks of not suffering, and they're working their way up to a point where really all they think about is their ideology, their ideas, and whether or not the ideas may be good. They may be wonderful ideas to them, and even in practice they may be wonderful ideas, but in practicality, it's not realistic to try to expect people that are trying to figure out where their next meal is going to come from to understand what you're talking about, or even care about what you're trying to sell them. So that's a very good point.
There are people so poor they actually don't know where their next meal is coming from. There's people so poor they don't know if they're going to eat or die next. Right? So they understand what it's like to feel real suffering and need. The rest of us don't.
That's why so many Middle Eastern governments, wealthy Middle Eastern governments, are unstable, because they're so fat and so rich.
And so fast. They got there so fast.
They got there so fast.
Yes,
That's true. Many of those countries only gained independence in 1971.
I've said that for a long time, when I just think to myself, how crazy is it that some of these countries have just had this massive amount of wealth dumped on them in such a short amount of time? You wonder why countries have all these cars, massive houses, and all these super rich princes, and all the government people are so, like he said, fat with wealth. Meanwhile, they still hold on to things like women shouldn't drive. Their infrastructure is completely destroyed everywhere else except for the rich areas. It's because everything was just pushed into one area really fast, and by that I mean the wealth. And honestly, you don't even know if it's going to spread out over time. Maybe it won't. Maybe they'll just be happy with what they have and say, screw everybody else. I don't get my money from my citizens through a normal way of taxation and building up the communities. We got our money from the resources of the land that we own.
In the Persian Gulf.
They went from being deserts with dates and Bedouins eating camel milk and dates, and then they became the richest countries in the world within 50 years.
I had a friend who was the son of a Kuwaiti ambassador, and Kuwait was my first overseas assignment, and he got drafted. He was in his 30s, and he got drafted. I said, drafted? I didn't even know there were any Kuwaitis in the Kuwaiti military. He said, no, there aren't. There aren't many. So he was a banker in Bahrain. He had to fly to Kuwait for basic training, and he said that on the first day there were like 24 guys, all Kuwaitis. Half of them were royal family members. On the second day there were like a dozen. Another dozen had just run away. And the third day, it was him and 2 other guys.
Wow.
And then all of the Kuwaitis were replaced by Pakistanis. You just pay them, give them a couple of dollars, and they'll just do your military service for you.
Because slavery is essentially legal in the Middle East. It's legal everywhere else outside of the United States. It arguably, it happens here in the United States, and people still turn a blind eye to it, too.
You know why King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia was so dark, or why Prince Bandar was so dark? Because their mothers were Sudanese slaves that were serving in the House of Saud.
Really?
They were the illegitimate children of slaves.
So John, you mentioned that we need frameworks, right? I want to go back to
That's one thing about when I listen to guys like this. Again, their knowledge is far superior to what mine would ever be on these topics. So when I listen to guys like this that have been embedded with the CIA, I can just sit here speechless for hours on end, because they're speaking things that I would have never known. Like, these royal guys, their mothers were slaves. And again, that happened in the United States way back when. Obviously, there were children born to slaves with presidents, etc. But we look at that and we think of it as, oh, that was 300 years ago. Oh, that was way in the past. That's history. These are guys that are like around right now. It's bonkers to think about just how those countries work, and how they have tried to figure it out along the way. And at the same time, the responsibility of having all that wealth and trying to manage it's inconceivable almost.
To this conversation. Because John mentioned that we need a framework to live by, to lead by.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I believe that the framework that the United States lives and leads by is the framework of change. It is not a framework of rigidity and legality. There's a system of legality to support a framework of change. Because what we have seen is that change is required. We must adapt. We must evolve. We must disrupt. If you're so tied into a legalistic system that you can't change it with the stroke of a pen, right? Essentially what you're saying is the chief executive, the president, who is voted into office by the people of the United States and delegates and et cetera, right? Essentially, that person has gone through a vetting process to be given the pen that can change the letter of the law in some cases in a moment. And where he can't change the letter of the law, there's a system to support other changes, whether that's the judicial branch or the legislative branch or whatever else. That is what is our framework. That is what gives us a huge advantage over many of our opposition governments and countries. That's why threats come and go, but the United States stays the same, because
I could see that. And obviously other leaders know that's how we work, and they know that if they want our leaders to make changes on their behalf, you have to go through a system. You can't just slide somebody a little bit of money. Maybe you can sometimes. How successful or unsuccessful that happens, I'm just sitting here, I'm trying not to say too much, but I think about the governors, the lower tier folks, not the president level, but the lower tier folks, the senators, etc., probably get a lot of bribes, a lot of money slid their way to vote or to lean a certain way, and then when the time gets there, they might not even have to say that the person that tried to pay them off thought they were going to. So I could see a lot of wasted money is basically what I'm trying to get around to saying. As to where other countries, you could probably just slide somebody $3 million and be like, hey man, just do this. And they'll just go sign a piece of paper and it's like that. So that was a very good point he made. I normally just think about the legislative judicial, executive branches being a check and balance just for the United States. Obviously it is, and that saves us from dictatorship. But, you know, a lot of times we don't think of it from an outside perspective of how they have to work the American system as well.
Or same, our consistency is being able to change, to flex, to meet the need and meet the threat that presents itself.
Well, so a question or comment and a question. It sounds like what you're describing is more of a European parliamentary system. That's a comment. But the question then is, would you support an easier way to amend the Constitution than the way that we have now, which would then affect change more easily?
Steve doesn't know it, but I haven't showered in 3 days.
Oh, we're watching the Mando.
How's it even possible?
We're
It's not
watching
like
the
a used
Mando
gym
ad.
sock on a wet dog in Satan's no-no closet.
I put it on before his gag reflex sets in. It's Mando's whole body deodorant, and it can go 72 hours per hit. That's how long it lasts.
Is it American made?
It sure is, Steve.
Does it work on the pits packaged in every crevice of the body?
Yes, it stops odor before
Okay.
it starts, Steve. Plus, it comes in 3 delicious flavors.
God
Mount
bless you,
Fuji,
Mando.
Pro Sport, and Clover Woods. My favorite thing about Mando is they don't
Okay, I'll cut it off. I'll let y'all go check out the rest of the Mando advertisement and the rest of Danny's podcast. I'll leave the full link down in the description below. It's a great podcast, and you should definitely subscribe to Danny Jon4es Podcast. It was previously Concrete Podcast, and I assume he wanted to rebrand due to all the, I guess, influx of viewers, subscribers. I'm not sure why. Maybe it was copyright or something. I don't know. But anyway, it's been a great podcast for a long time. I'm a subscriber. I love watching his stuff. And he has a lot of interesting guests on his show. So, at any rate, thanks you guys for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm trying to grow my channel as well. So please feel free to subscribe if you haven't already. I do appreciate your views. And I appreciate you as a person and your opinion. Have a blessed day.